This meeting of the Finance Committee is called to order at 10:39 a.m. on Wednesday, February 26th. Thank you all so much for being here today. We have a, all things considered, relatively light agenda, but our first order of business is our roll call. Alderwoman Finlayson, are you here?
Present.
Excellent. Alderwoman O'Neill? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, a lot of static though, a lot of static.
Present.
Alderman Huntley is here as well. All right, first up we have approval of the agenda, and I would like to, at this time, entertain a motion to add to the agenda, to approve the agenda with the additions of FT 1025 and R10.
I'll make a motion to approve agenda as amended.
Mr. Chair, would you repeat the additions to the amendment or to the agenda, please?
Yes, they are FT 1025, which is a fund transfer
No,
from...
fee waiver.
No,
Oh, sorry.
FT 1025 is the fund transfer
Sorry.
regarding pickleball lights at Truxton, and R10 is the fee waiver for the film festival.
I will second it, but there's a lot of static, and I'm not understanding all of your all that you're saying. But I will approve it for the sake of moving the agenda.
Is it any better if I talk right into the microphone, Alderwoman Finlayson? No, not any better. Okay.
I don't think it's on the microphone's end. I've sent Julian a text. I hope it reaches him.
I believe our city council associate is working with Julian on getting it fixed. All right. Moving down the agenda then, I believe we'll have FT 1025 first. This is with... Oh, thank you. Right, yes. Approval of the minutes. Our Finance Committee meeting minutes from February 19th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes as written?
Motion to approve 2/19/25 regular meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Excellent. Okay. FT 1025 is a fund transfer moving $38,850 of funding from the pickleball court lights project to the Truxton Park Improvement Project. This is related to what we heard last week about the skate park at Truxton Heights, at Truxton Park, which was ended up being a bigger cost than we expected. We were able to get funding, grant funding for a chunk of it, and as I understand, this is the remainder of the funding needed to complete that skate park. So we're moving that from pickleball court lights. I don't see anyone from Department of Public Works here, but yeah. Jake, do you have something you want to say on it, or our city manager? I mean, no need to if there's no need to, but...
Jake Trudeau, Budget Manager, your assessment is correct. This funding will allow DPW to be able to complete the project.
And I'm sorry, Jake, can I just ask, is the pickleball courts, how do we end up with extra money left over on that? It just was cheaper than we thought it would be?
So the history of this project, to my understanding, is when we first went out, the quote was way higher than what we had budgeted. We added some more money. They went and did a second quote, and that came in under what we have budgeted now. So now they have excess. They plan to finish both of these projects in 25.
Got it. And why is it that this is almost all from the bonds, and then there's just a little bit from the capital reserve?
So I don't have the project page in front of me, but if memory serves, that capital reserve is going to be overhead piece, which is internal for us, and then we needed the majority of the funding is going to be through bonds.
Yeah. Alderman Finlayson, you have a question as well?
You are muted, Alderwoman.
I don't know that she doesn't have her mute button on there. But
I am not muted.
Oh, now you're going. We got you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My question is, I'm looking for the budget sheet. And I just think I heard our budget manager say he didn't have one in front of him. Is it the same one that was provided to us at the previous meeting? That's what I was looking for. Can you still not hear me?
We can hear you.
So
Yes, Finance Director.
Finance
Dickinson.
Director Jody Dickinson, I wanted to say, although we put this through the approval process through the DocuSign, I didn't realize it was coming onto the agenda today. So that's why we don't have it in front of us, although we have seen the support for it. It is what we spoke of the other day when they were asking for the extra funding for the skate park. And they said they had some excess funding in another project. This is what Donovan was referring to. So this is the money coming through to fund the rest of that.
Excellent. And I think, Alderman Finlayson, that you should have it in your email, the document that Alderwoman O'Neill and I have right here. Is that correct? Yes,
Was it
that
just
is
sent
correct.
this morning? Was it sent this morning? I'm trying to determine where it is.
It was sent yesterday. I'll resend it for you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm not prepared to vote on this until I get the copy of the document, so it's coming now. Should
Sure.
we move
Okay.
on to the next item and come back to this one?
That's just fine by me. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau, for jumping in there. All right, next up on our agenda is R1025, which is the fee waiver for the film festival. Sorry, Ms. Hopkins, to make you jump up there. I know our agenda looks a little bit different than we expected. R1025 is a fee waiver for the film festival, and gosh, sorry, it just went in front of me. But we should have that. Essentially, this is the film festival is looking for their fee waiver. And I believe it was for up to $2,500. And do I see any questions from members of the committee about this? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just want to point out that the Film Festival is an organization that gets money from the city. Last year, they were put in as a line item under Planning and Zoning for $15,000. They're also getting funding, most likely from Art in Public Places, and that request has been in at $40,000. And in the past, when they have paid the fees, basically it's one of those, if they're getting money from the city, they're using the city money to pay that fee. So I just wanted on record that perhaps this is one more instance where we have an organization that's doing an event that's asking to waive fees that also gets money from the city, that perhaps we need to take a look at that total amount that they're getting from the city and maybe reduce it by the amount of fees, because we have fees and fines for a reason. They're supposed to be paying for things, and if we're constantly waiving them, where is that money coming from that we're waiving, so to speak? Because we're still paying for the security and the cleanup and parking spaces, things like that. So I am in support of it. I think that the film festival is good for the city, but it's just, I wanted to point out that it's one more instance in the city where we're waiving a fee. And if we're always waiving fees, then what's the point of the fee? So it wasn't a question.
No, completely agree, though. And I think I was actually, in preparation from this, digging into last year's budget and looking at where that money came from and seeing, they got the money under planning and zoning. Previously, I think they'd gotten money as a community grant. We didn't do that this last year. But yeah, we want a full accounting of how much each one of these organizations is getting. Yes, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been advocating for the film festival since its inception. I think we all recognize the tremendous value that it brings to our city. What I think is missing is their actual accounting of their expenditures. the city is listed as a sponsor. And in my mind, a $15,000 sponsorship is a mere pittance to what it costs to run the festival. Even with the additional benefits that they receive as partners, i.e. public safety, parking, and the likes, it doesn't hold a candle to their total expenses. And I think the mayor will speak to this more handsomely than I. And so the $15,000, and I've encouraged us to go up to as much as $25,000 if we're going to be a true partner in the festival. And then after giving them the $15,000 and finally moving it to a line item, because in the past they were competing with all of the other nonprofits, which they have a partnership with us. It's somewhat different than the other partnerships or the other nonprofits. So I'm very pleased that it was moved to public, whatever department it was moved to, public planning and zoning. But it is a city-sponsored event in partnership. And so this is just one more expense for them that we can bear, given the fact that we're only giving them the $15,000 per year. So maybe when we have an opportunity to hear from nonprofits, and I'd like to have that discussion today, we can hear from them and they can share with us their entire budget and expenditures. So we'll have a true understanding of what it costs to put on that festival. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all sort of in agreement. We just want to see what all the costs are in one place. For the record, I will say that I am supportive of this fee waiver, but I also want to ensure that the film festival follows all of our rules or potentially goes through a process to get an exception around noise ordinances. I have heard from one or two neighbors about their party at the opening night, and I love a good party, but I do want to make sure anybody who's, if we have rules, that they're being followed or we're using the process for an exception. So I was hoping we could have them here today to talk about that. Scheduling didn't quite make sense, but before we pass this completely on the floor, I do want to make sure that we get that assurance from them that they will follow those requirements. So just putting that into the record. I think that wraps up our discussion. So do I see a motion to favorably recommend R1025?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much. Okay, so we have two discussions today, and I'm glad we're having a little bit of a different finance committee meeting because we're going to get to spend quite a lot of time on these discussions that I think will really tee us up to have a strong budget process and, well, have a strong budget process because that's what we're talking about today. It's two different ones. But let's start with the one that's more related to our last budget, which is from our HR director. And thank you for joining us. So, before we jump into the whole presentation of it, I just want to tee up, as I think my colleagues heard me talk about on Monday, there's some serious frustration around positions that have been approved in the budget that have not been filled. And good to see here that there are quite a few that have been filled or are in the process of being filled. But I just recognize that some of these are really crucial. Our short-term rental manager, gosh, that is one that I hear about weekly from folks. So my hope was just to have a discussion around which positions we included in the budget, which positions we have hired for of those, and making sure that we're able in our upcoming budget to really hit the ground running once it's passed on getting those hired. And just, I think at this point, I'll turn the floor over to either of my colleagues to set up any more exposition for this discussion, particularly maybe Alderwoman O'Neill. I know you and I had talked about this. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, I think that I'm interested to hear what's going on and how we can streamline the process so that we ensure that positions are filled.
Oh. Alderman Finlayson, any exposition you got?
No, I'm just interested in hearing from Ms. Hopkins, actually, and with particular interest for me on the local lobbyist position. I got a call on that this morning, so.
Yes. which I think might not be on here. I think that might have to, is that correct? That might have to come from our city manager's office. But yes, I would be excited to hear about that as well. So, Ms. Hopkins, you have the
You ready?
floor. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
I know you've been in front of our committee a lot recently, so thanks for making another finance committee meeting.
That's okay. So I'm Tricia Hopkins, Human Resources Manager. I just, you have a report before you that should be a listing of all of the approved positions that are coming through payroll. So these are individual positions that may be in the category of civil service, maybe exempt service, would be part-time, temporary, or under employment agreements. So I'll kind of walk you through all of them as we go through. I have provided a summary on the back so you can know after we've been through that how many of them are filled, how many are in the process for filling, and how many are waiting for the resolution or the exempt service bill to pass, the ordinance. So you want me to go through them individually? Would that be helpful?
I think not.
Okay.
Just because we're looking at it, but would you mind explaining just like sort of points as we have particular ones that folks want to hear about? So I would
Yeah.
start with that short-term rental manager. Would you mind explaining where that one stands?
So where that stands is there's just recent approval between Chris Jakubiak and myself around the job description. So they'll be submitting their vacancy request form, and then we'll go forth and post that. So we're in good shape on that one now. So let me just make an overall
Yeah,
statement.
that'd be
So
great.
there's some understanding around why some are filled and some are not filled. And so what we made great attempt to do is use the class and comp study for a couple of purposes. In some cases, it's to have an entirely new title as may be necessary. They might have made a recommendation to use an existing title, but maybe a different existing title. And so we needed the results of that work in order to make a good judgment in some cases. That includes the conversion of positions. And to the extent that there were titles that were not already in our position summary, or if it affected exempt service positions, an ordinance that made that change, sometimes it was not a title change, but a grade change, but nonetheless had an impact on filling the position or reclassifying an incumbent through that. We were able to identify a number of positions that were new using existing titles and then go forth and fill. And so that's the case with a number of the positions. We had an existing architectural plan reviewer, senior planner, emergency planner. So when we had titles that were already approved and able to be used, we just went forth and did the action. So a lot of our filled designations are more tied to the fact that those positions already existed in title, already been through council approval, already part of the position summary, and we were able to use that. For those that weren't, that's largely you're waiting for the resolution or the exempt service ordinance to occur before we can take the action. And then in some cases, some decisions were made or some results came out of the requests that needed to be otherwise reviewed and understood. We know that the short-term rental, we had some back and forth on that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure on the housing quality liaison what we have left to do. So I'm working with Director Jakubiak on that, and we'll move forward on that as quickly as possible. In some cases, we're going to need to go back and do more of what they call position audit to get an appropriate title and grade for the position. Even though it was a recommendation of the council, was handled through council action, it doesn't necessarily mean that's where we can land, because clearly you want to make sure it's integrated well with your classification and compensation work.
And just so I understand, I saw somewhere on here, like for the senior office associate in public works, it says desk audit. Is that the same thing as the position audit?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes, so they put a designation of a senior office associate, which wasn't a title that even existed. So we clearly wanted to make sure that you're evaluating a position. So what I made sure happened during the course of the class and comp study is that all of the positions that were of concern that and had like positions or similar positions out there that we did make sure the focus groups or the individual interviews that occurred through that class and comp study accounted for them. So this one was one of those. There wasn't a recommendation for change. If they still feel a change is appropriate, that's where you got to drill down and look very more specifically at what that position's doing, separate from somebody else. So what we didn't do through the classification and compensation study was have job analysis questionnaires filled out by everybody. It was done through an interview process directly with the classifiers as part of the class and comp study.
Did you say you did not have the
They
job
did not
analysis?
complete job analysis questionnaires. They were asked to do a short version of that. It wasn't a drill down version. They were asked to provide information to the classifiers so that their interview process was more useful to the classifiers. But generally, when you get into a job audit or a position audit, if it's vacant, you are getting considerably more detailed information from which you evaluate the position. And so when you get into these situations where it still doesn't align with what the person thought it should be or the intent maybe of the legislation or the budget approval rather, we would have to go into a deeper look. And so we need the methodology.
How we determine where an employment agreement is most appropriate versus the alternative?
I think what's healthy for the city, especially when you're kind of designing a job as you get, as you are trying to put it together, it's easier when you have a good idea of how you're going to apply the skills and you know clearly what the purpose is, you know clearly what the effective action is, and it already is, it's already well described and well defined. It makes really good sense when you're trying to come out of the gate and see, okay, how's this going to work? How are we going to apply the intent of legislative change, maybe? It makes really good sense to get through an employment agreement arrangement first. We always have the ability to come back later and do conversions to civil service or exempt service, depending on where the position is. We've done that in the city in a number of places. When we started with liaisons specifically to the Hispanic community and to the African American community, we did that. We did that initially. It grew over time. It became more defined. The programs started to come into play as grants were brought into it. In the case of the short-term rental position, we're trying to figure out how the fees and the actions taken by the department through this position are going to happen. And so that's another one that makes good sense to start out under an employment agreement, get your feet under yourself, redefine, refine the function and the scope of work, and then come back and look at it more specifically when you're ready to look at it for conversion.
And when they are under an employment agreement, just this isn't really relevant to our discussion, but just so I understand, are they represented as part of the bargaining unit?
No.
Okay, that's what I figured.
And this position wouldn't necessarily be a bargaining unit position. We're trying to still figure out where does it fall in terms of scope and purpose.
Sure.
So in that regard, it becomes at some point if it goes through a conversion and it satisfies what they call the community of interest that a bargaining unit would expect in terms of positions, the union can ask for that position to be represented. And we have a process to address that.
And just so I understand, again, some of this is me learning. You were talking about some of these positions being civil service, some of them being exempt. The only one on here that to me looks like it would be exempt is the director of central services. Are there any, or maybe that would be exempt?
Well,
but I see
there
the
is
grade not.
also see where it's listed on here. It's the grade change that's going to happen for the position that Tola is in.
Ah,
And
It's
so
second from the
that's,
bottom.
that's in
Yeah.
your exempt service bill, ordinance rather.
Oh, I see. I see that. Yep. Oh, African American. Oh no, second from the bottom.
That is the second from the bottom listed under the mayor's office.
Yeah, mayor's office on
Yeah.
the back.
So it's not really a conversion, it's a grade change on the position.
Got it. And this exempt service ordinance, that's one of the ones we were considering on
It's in
Monday.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all the exempt service positions are listed in the code. And
Right.
because that's hard listed in the code rather than in a position summary, which is only civil service jobs, that's where that has to occur.
This has been very helpful. Thank you. Just even just having this piece of paper is super helpful, and then being able to ask you all the questions about it. This is precisely how I wanted this to go. So thank you. Yeah, I see Alderman Finlayson has a question.
Yes, I have two questions, actually. One is very specific to the Office of Community Services. And it says that additional wages are needed for OCS staff. Is this the process that we use to get additional funding for staff?
Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager. It is not. That was an amendment that was approved by council during the last budget development. The reason the note is what it is because that isn't, you are correct, the way that we normally do that. And so to honor the intent of the funding, which is growth of those staff, OCS, Aisha has identified some work-related training, deep training opportunities that will both allow them to enhance their skills in their current jobs, but also then be applicable and allow for some potential growth into the future. That's not going to require all of the funding that was approved in that amendment. And so council just approved that fund transfer for rental assistance, which is the other part and then unused portion of that money that had been part of that.
So in our budget, we have a line item for training, do we not?
Yes.
And so this is requesting an additional funding beyond what was approved in the budget?
Yeah, Jody might be able to answer this better than I can. There are limits for what can be internally transferred within the same area, functional area, and that fell under that limit. So the fund transfer for the rental assistance was beyond that limit. That's why that came in front of council. Training portion was under that limit.
And to add, this list is a list of the personnel actions that were added in the budget. And for that particular line item, as Vicki explained, some of it is going to be used for training, which we can do with the city manager has the authority because it's under the dollar amount the city manager can transfer within the general fund. And the other went into the housing trust fund to help with the rental assistance. And that's the piece that you just approved. I think it was on Monday night.
Okay, this is just a
Hold on
very.
one sec. Alderwoman Finlayson, just 1 sec. I want to give the floor to Alderwoman O'Neill. She's got a quick question.
I'm sorry, I thought I had the floor. I hadn't quite finished, but you go
I
ahead.
think she's just got a quick clarification. Yeah.
So my recollection, Alderman Finlayson, was that the amendment was actually for additional wages or bonuses or something like that to the Office of Community Services, but in talking with the city manager's office, they decided that they didn't want that. and they wanted instead for it to go to training, which is why it's still in here, I think, because it was a list from that. But it was not initially approved in the amendment process as training. It was initially approved as additional pay for them. So that might be relevant to some of the confusion as to why it's on this list.
Well, I think the process that we use should be consistent. Other departments will see this as an opportunity also. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is something we're doing different and outside of our normal processes.
We did not do part of the point here is that we could not do something outside of our normal processes. And so what we have tried to do was to honor the spirit that the amendment was offered in, but through a mechanism that is within our normal processes and procedures.
And so if I were to go back and look at that ordinance change, then it would speak to the fiscal impact.
Of the original amendment. Yeah, the original amendment to the budget, would show the dollar amount.
Okay. I did have a second question, but I'll have to come back to it because now I've lost my place.
Okay, well, I've got a quick one, hopefully, for our HR manager. On the back, it's titled Other Position Actions Approved in FY25 Budget, and that I understand for most of these, they're not positions being added, but I just wanted to check the Harbor Master Operations Supervisor and the camera monitor. Are those positions that were added, or is there just some other change happening?
Those are positions that were slated for conversion. So the camera monitor, from employment agreement to civil service titles, and we needed the titles. We need them through you'll find them in the position summary in R54.
And there are two of the Harbor Master Operations Supervisors. Yeah, okay. Cool, thank you.
There are two individuals who will have the same title. Yeah.
Alderman Finlayson, can we go back
Yes,
to you?
thank you. I do recall my other question. It was a very general one for Ms. Hopkins. It sounds like our hiring process, and I'm using the term hiring process very generically, is extremely lengthy. How would we address that problem? I know the different procedures and steps you must go through in HR. However, when we create positions in the budget on July 1, we fully expect that those positions be filled at least within several months of the passing of the budget. And even though we probably know in advance of that what's going to be approved. We have positions, those here and those that are not listed here, that have been funded and there's been no movement. The short-term rental person is the perfect example, and that's been multiple years, I believe, at least 2 years in the making, since that was originally proposed by Alderwoman Tierney. So do we need a timeline to make sure that we get through all of the procedures, to make sure that we get staff hired in a timely fashion?
So part of the challenge is whether there's an existing title, whether there's already an approved title and grade that's in the position summary. If there is, it's really just a matter of when the department's ready to initiate the vacancy request form and move forward. HR is very quick in the release of those once we have approved forms. We're also going through a conversion to a new,
Sorry,
that's okay.
hospital calling. Go ahead.
So we're also going through a conversion to a new applicant tracking system. And so that is part of our process too, which will help streamline the number of days and period of time it takes to fill positions. But generally, once the positions are approved, if there's an existing title already there, it's just a matter of movement from the appointing authority to go forward with the recruitment process. If it's not there, if it's something that needs a title, then we have a legislative process to go through. We also have a practical process of evaluating what's an appropriate title, what's an appropriate grade assignment, and go forth there. If it's an employment agreement, that is not complicated by that legislative process. It's a matter of us going through an internal review, creating a job description, defining the intent and purpose, and working with the department on the creation of that to move forward.
I just wanted to add regarding that, if the title doesn't exist, we've talked a couple of times about needing to change and tighten up our process during the budget process itself and the amendment process itself to catch that kind of thing, so that by the time, because the position classification summary is part of that package of legislation that collectively forms the budget, that to get work together to create the budget. And so part of our process, part of the conversation we've been having has been, how do we tighten up that process during budget development so that the associated legislation that has, like the position classification summary, for example, that does in fact get updated right there in the moment, to try to make that timeline work better. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to make that work better. And I have said before, and will say again, and we definitely need to do better on that.
Thank you. So my next question was going to be, there is a lot of frustration, obviously, from the council as we're passing legislation, and there's currently, not that I'm aware of, there is not currently a place where we can go to see the timeline of events. It's me reaching out to our director of public works to get an update on CIP projects, and I think this kind of falls within that, and I would love to see us create, I know that you were working on a lot of SOPs last year, I would love to see us create a document that's easily accessible by the council, so that we can see where things are in process. We passed a lot of things in the FY25 budget, and to the point of some of us being new and trying to figure out what was passed, what we should be passing, what we should be looking at and asking for future budgets. Sometimes we're asking for things that were actually passed, but there's been no movement on them and no indication that they're actually in the works. So I appreciate the fact that you're saying we all need to do better. We need a process.
Yeah, having a better process on the front end then sets us up for better tracking afterward.
Right. Like, I feel like the short-term rental manager only came to light in October when I started asking, like, why aren't we have so many issues, why don't we have it? Only to find out that it was way down in the pipeline for actually being looked at and considered. So I appreciate the fact that we're communicating and we're talking. I do think that we can create a better pipeline for initiating and for taking care of the things that are being passed in the budget. Thank you.
I'll say here to everything Alderwoman O'Neill just said, and also I think it's a strong argument for why would be good for the council to have a staffer focused on implementation who looks at these are things in the budget and updates every month where the status is. That's just one way to do it. Quick question for me. I see a couple of these are noted as being funded via water, sewer, and stormwater, or water and sewer, or one just says sewer. Other than these, looks like lines 6 or 7 through all of these public works ones, is everything else being funded out of the general fund?
Not necessarily. I have to tell you, as we were scrubbing through this list, the starting point is actually the budget, the work that budget team does to keep track of stuff, which for them also includes notes about what's funded out of where. And I scrubbed some of that out to try to be consistent, and I clearly missed on other parts. So that's more an accident of my editing. I think if you had an interest, I think you might.
Jake Trudeau, budget manager. For the most part, a lot of these are going to be the general fund. You'll see, like you mentioned, the program manager, that might be split 50-50 between water and sewer. And then transportation, obviously, a separate fund, but everything else, Recs and Parks, Central Service, Mayor's Office, Finance, OEM, all of that's going to be planning and zoning general fund.
Got it. Thank you. Are there any other questions about this? All right, well, seeing none, I just want to say thanks so much to, I'm sorry, before we quite go, Jake, you're good. Before we quite wrap up this topic, we were going to get an update also on hiring of both of our lobbyists, which I understand are contractual positions, but things I would like to know about.
My update on that is limited, but I will do my best, and will end up having to come back with a fuller description for the pieces I don't know. I don't believe that was being pursued as a position,
Right.
As either civil service or a contractual position.
I see what you're saying.
More of a vendor relation, the same way we have the Ferguson Group.
Sure.
On the federal side. I do know that that Mr. Malinoff had pursued a couple of leads that he was aware of. I think the question, this money was actually put in the mayor's office. The Ferguson Group is actually out of the city manager's office. I think that created a little bit of confusion about who was lead on it. So my understanding is that we're sort of picking some of that up. I don't really have more information than that, but I can collect that and get back.
Okay. I'll say sort of two thoughts, and I appreciate the explanation about mayor's versus city manager's office. First, I think at this point, not a whole lot of point in hiring a state lobbyist. It would have been really, really helpful to have one in place for this legislative session because, for a lot of reasons, but this particular one. But at this point, I don't know how much help there'll be. But my question to you, Ms. Buckland, is my inclination is that it makes sense to have both of those lobbyists go through the mayor's office because the mayor's office is inherently more political. We want the city manager to be focused on keeping the trains running on time, as it were. How do you, and maybe here you're speaking a little bit for Mr. Malinoff because I think he's been a little bit more engaged, but just could you share how the city manager's office thinks about where those two positions should be run out of?
I'm not going to pretend to speak for Mr. Malinoff, but I will speak for myself. From my observations of my observation is that the federal lobbying, in some sense, is a slightly different beast than state and local. The Ferguson Group has been very helpful and instrumental, not only with, in some sense, sort of straight lobbying, but they also have a lot of contacts and information about just new funding opportunities that have come into play and stuff like that, which is not strictly speaking lobbying, but is more about making sure that we're well connected, we're well informed. And so there is a strong element of what they do that's not strictly speaking political per se. The state and local, there's not quite as strong of a just purely administrative grants portion to the state. So, and obviously my up close view of that is more limited. But I think having certainly the federal stuff in the city manager's office makes some sense to me, just because there is a stronger nexus of non-political activity that they do. Not sure I'm necessarily a great source of an opinion for the other part. I would have him speak for himself.
Sure. Oh, thank you. And yeah, just last week I put together a memo for my day job on exactly which parts are lobbying and which parts are not. And so, yeah, happy. I can certainly appreciate that distinction. Alderman Finlayson, you had brought this up. Did we cover your question about the lobbyists, or do you have anything else you'd like to ask?
Well, first of all, just to concur with your comment about timing, it's kind of late for this legislative session since it's almost over. I do like Ms. Buckland's thinking about the federal lobbyists being with the city manager. I think the local lobbyists should also be with the city manager. If you look at our history of needing to go before our legislature, it hasn't necessarily been on political issues as much as programmatic and other sorts of business-related issues, be it the Office of Emergency Preparedness or the Planning Department. So when we get to have that discussion, I think it will have some merit to talk about where it lands. The mayor's office seat changes every 4 to 8 years. Do we want the approach that the lobbyist takes to change? Of course, there should be some influence from the mayor's office, but not necessarily the guidance totally. So anyway, that's worth discussing. But yes, I think my question has been answered. We're not going to have a lobbyist this year is what I'm deducting. So thank you for circling back, and thank you, Ms. Hopkins, Ms. Buckland, and Ms. Dinkinson for answering my questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you again
You're
for
very
being
welcome.
here, Ms. Hopkins. Really appreciate it. This has been everything I wanted. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is our department presentation calendar for the budget, ID 5425. And suppose perhaps we need our budget manager for that, who just stepped out. But
Can we talk about?
oh, right. Yes. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Let's go back to FT 1025. Alderwoman Finlayson, were you able to pull up FT 1025?
Yes, I'm able to get it, and I am good with it. I just wanted to make sure it had all of the attachments with it, and it does.
Excellent. Okay. Well, given that, is there a motion to approve FT 1025? Sorry, to
I'll
make a favorable recommendation. Yes.
I'll make a favorable recommendation to approve FT 1025.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Ayes
Thank
have
you.
it. Yeah, thanks for reminding me to go back to that. Okay, well, now we are on our department presentation calendar and perfect timing. No. So I'll say just before I was looking at this, and there's two changes in particular that I want to make, relatively minor. One is I noticed in a few spots our presentations end at, let's say, 10:30, and then we have a break from 10:35 to 10:45. I want us to run a very tight ship with this. I want to make sure that we have very clear times that things are going to happen and then stick to it. So in that spirit, let's make sure that our breaks start when our presentations are actually scheduled to end. And I think our city council associate will make sure we update that. The other thing that I'll just start talking about is I have said, oh, actually, maybe before I jump in, let's turn it back to Jake, who's now here. Hi, Jake. So what we're doing here is just going over the Finance Committee budget hearing schedule. And I said one minor thing I want to change. We can wait for the more major thing, medium major thing. But would you just, not line by line, but walk us through what this is about, why it's important, and any changes from how it's been done previously?
Sure. So what this budget hearing schedule does is basically shows when departments are going to present in front of you, how long they have. The biggest change from last year, and obviously previous years too, is going to be the first Thursday. We typically don't have the council work session on that first Thursday. It's usually the second. So that's a big change. That is in our budget timeline resolution that we did. So we moved that to the first Thursday. And then another change is that we bucketed Public Works and the presentation from Stantec together because that makes sense. Last year, I think it was on 2 separate days. And then the third thing is, it seemed from last year's discussion that we needed to have a full day dedicated to community grants. So that is another change as well. And then the third week is, of course, when you all are writing your report.
Excellent. Thank you. So one thing that I have said very strongly, that I feel very strongly about, which I'd like to see reflected in here, is an hour for our 4 unions to come and present and each have 15 minutes. I'd recommend we do that on Tuesday, the 29th, after our Public Works and Enterprise Fund discussion. So I'd just like to see an hour added in for that. Talked with our chiefs, with our assistant city manager, and I'll say that based on those discussions, I still want to do this. We're not going to in years where we have active negotiations with our unions, but since we don't this year, I would like to make sure that gets added onto the schedule, an hour for that.
May I recommend, if you see on Thursday, we have that presentation overflow. Could we use that hour instead of... Are you tied to the 29th?
I'm not tied to the 29th, but I do think we should have a time for presentation overflow. So maybe we could do that 10:45 to 11:45 a.m. slot on Thursday and then add an additional afternoon slot on the first for the presentation overflow. But I'd like to keep that just in case.
Sure. On the 5th, we have presentation overflow too available.
Oh,
If
okay.
you're-
I'm sorry. I was
That's
missing.
okay.
No, yes. Let's do it on the first then. That's great. Sure. No, we have 2 presentations. And also, I want to make sure that it happens after our fire and police. Okay, that's great though. Do it Thursday the 5th, the 1st, from 10:45 to 11:45.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much. I have a question probably for Ms. Buckland, and that is, I know in the past, we've talked and we've worried that if we give the department directors, if we tell them that there's an hour, that they use the hour for their presentation. And a lot of times the presentation really is a reiteration of what's been sent to us. Do you think it's plausible to have or let the directors know that their presentation should be like a 15-minute, a 20-minute increment versus the entire hour, so that we can really allocate a good portion of that presentation time for questions?
Yeah, we can definitely give that message. If there are also particular questions that you want to make sure that directors address, kind of just general topics, we can, and we actually did this last year with some of the departments. We kind of created a little bit of a template, and because you saw a number of them were similar. We can do that again this year, particularly if there's some topics you want to make sure they address. Let us know. We can work that into a template, but we can send the message about it.
Right. Alderwoman Finlayson, I know that, for instance, last year we tried to, in our Finance Committee report, really treat each department equally, and that was sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're positive, the goals that were met, the goals that were unmet. If we had them frame their presentations to that, do you think that's helpful? Knowing that full well that we can also go in and read the deep dive on their presentation, that they're not just going slide by slide, reading word for word on them. Do you?
Well, if you recall, we gave them the template, as Ms. Buckland mentioned, and it was that template that we used to make sure that all of the information was parallel. And so if we do that again, then it makes it easier for us in writing the report to simply take out the information that we want to use, particularly the information that hasn't been seen or heard as of that point. For example, the fire department gave us all of their annual statistics. So we could see how many calls they had for that year, and likewise. So absolutely. But we did give them a parameter. And if you recall, we did ask them to make their reports 20 minutes, I think is what we gave them. And most of them stayed well within the timeline that we had given them, which allowed us additional time for questions. So they will be accustomed to doing that again.
So it sounds, what I'm hearing is there's broad consensus on the committee that we would like our director's presentations to stick to no more than 20 minutes, such that the remaining time can be for particular highlights that they wouldn't have included otherwise in the presentation, but that we may have asked them ahead of time, and questions at the meeting. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I also ask Ms. Buckland to make sure enhancements are included in their in the template that they use?
Yep. Will do.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out there that I do not have much tolerance for people reading off of PowerPoint slides. So any department directors listening to this, don't do that or I will stop you. I saw Alderman Gay joined us. Did you have something in particular you want to jump in with on this? We're discussing the budget presentation schedule. Just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity.
Yeah, here.
My question is not necessarily related to the schedule. It's related to amendments that we have passed that have not, the money hasn't been spent. We're having trouble allocating it. And I want to spend my amendment money before the fiscal year ends.
Sure. And just so I understand how we want to structure that discussion, are you talking about positions or something else?
I had money set aside for positions, but the HR department wouldn't let me do it. And so I had to reallocate it for something else. I think at this point, most of it is for programs, operations.
Got it. Okay.
And capital projects.
Got it. Okay, let's wrap up our discussion on the schedule then and then come back to that. Are there any other questions, edits to the schedule, or given what we've discussed, is the committee good with this?
Mr. Chair, do you have any direction for the union presentations, what you're looking for there?
Yeah, the biggest thing is I don't want them to repeat the department directors' goals. I want to hear from them on, and again, I think we can, so they're each can be here 15 minutes, so let's do 5 to 10 minutes for them to present, and then 5 to 10 minutes for us to ask some questions. But again, the biggest thing I'd emphasize is just, I think that our department directors and our unions are probably 90-95% aligned. What I want to hear about is that 5% or 10% where it's things that the unions would think about that are budget specific, but that might not be included in what the department directors would state. So the biggest thing is just don't repeat what the department directors are going to say.
Thank you.
And keep it to being budget related.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alderman Finlayson.
May I suggest that Mr. Lyles be present for that presentation? I am very concerned that we're walking dangerously close to a line of unfair labor practice.
Sure. And I'll
so
just say, we're not going to be negotiating. We're just listening.
It's not about negotiating, however, and I do understand. But what you're asking the unions to do may lead to bargaining issues. So I would just like to say, I'm not the attorney, but I would like to ask that Mr. Lyles be present for that discussion.
Sure. No problem with that.
Thank you.
Anything else on the budget scheduling? Seeing none, we would,
A motion.
yeah, I guess. Well, we don't really, this isn't really a item. Sure. Okay. So let's just be clear then, if we're going to actually motion on this, let's be clear on our amendments to it. I want to run through them. So one is to, in the Thursday 5/1, 10:45 to 11:45 a.m. time slot, add 4 15-minute presentations from our unions, which will have City Attorney Lyles present. That is one amendment here. Another amendment here is making sure that the breaks start when the presentations end. Another amendment is to, somewhere on here, make it clear that we only expect the directors to present for no more than 20 minutes, the remainder of which will be answering either our written questions that have already gone in or our questions that are in person. Am I missing anything else that we just talked about?
Can I ask a
Yeah.
clarification question? So, from my understanding, department directors haven't seen this yet completely. There's a conflict. How should we go about?
Kaylin.
Yeah, I'm happy to, in terms of when each one of them happens, unless we tell you otherwise, like I just said, I want to make sure the unions one happens after police and fire, then I'm happy to defer to the budget manager and the city council associate on working that out, and as long as the committee members are kept informed.
Thank you.
Are there any other changes that we made to this that I'm not remembering? Seeing none, is there a motion for us to approve, and in this case I will say approve, not just favorably recommend, this budget hearing schedule as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for everybody who worked on putting this together. Okay. We have our finance department update. I think the way we can do this is have Director Dickinson give the finance department update, and then Alderman Gay, if you have questions, I think that'd be the most appropriate time to ask them. So, Director Dickinson, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Finance Director Jody Dickinson. I sent this report earlier this morning, so you should have it in your email. Just to tell you that we are wrapping up the ACFR. It should be out with an audit opinion within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And
I'm
as
sorry,
far
can you
as
say that again? What you're wrapping up?
ACFR, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. I'm sorry, that's an acronym that not everybody's familiar with.
No, it's an important one. Thank you.
takes our June 30 information and puts it into a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. It's a book, and it takes a while to pull it all together. So that's final. The numbers, the financial amounts have stopped changing in the fall, but we're pulling this book together and finishing the audit procedures, and that's a time-consuming task. We have the staffing openings, as you know. We have a new finance director, hopefully going to be approved soon and starting within the next few weeks. And I'm taking a look at the assistant finance director applications to see if there's a group in there that we can set up interviews for the new finance director to take a look at. And I'm still trying to get a contractual person for accounts payable staff. There's three, it really takes 3 people in there to keep things going. And right now we have a vacancy and we have somebody out on limited medical. She's doing some work from home, but not back in the office yet. So we really have like 1.5 people working in that group, which affects all the departments with the payments and the P-card transactions. So we'd like to keep that up to date. On the budget, we've already talked about the budget. You're well aware what's going on there. And debt, I put a little blurb in here for the debt. We're not going to issue any new debt anytime soon. We still have proceeds left from our debt issuance from 2 years ago. So we have proceeds there that have to be used up before we consider issuing any more debt. So I don't foresee that in the near future.
Wonderful.
That's all.
Thank you. Any questions for the finance director? All right. Well, Alderman Gay had some questions, but I suppose he can, he went to get coffee. But I suppose he can ask those offline. I don't know. I think we should adjourn rather than staying here waiting for him to get back. So, all right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, we've lost Alderman Finlayson's
She
voice
said
again.
motion to. I read it.
Nope, sorry, I finally turned my mic off. Stop my phone from ringing. I would like to hear the discussion with Alderman Gay, however.
Okay. Well, we can wait a moment for him to get back.
Or we can adjourn if Julian will allow us to stay live.
I don't think we can do that. I think if we all stay here, we've got an open meeting or a business meeting. We need to make sure it's open. So
I can hear you when we go off. I can hear you when he presses the right button before the meeting begins. So but it's up to you. It's your.
yeah, I think we'll just pause for one moment.
We should have
Can someone go and get Alderman Gay? Is he in
Yeah.
the hall? Or-
No, yeah. He's coming. I don't think that's what the purpose is. Yeah, Alderman Gay, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would like a updated list of our amendments passed from last year's budget process, both the capital projects as well as like regular operating amendments. I did put this in email, and they sent me an email back asking, well, what amendments do you want to see? I'm not working in finance, so I'm not tracking the amendments. So I want to see all of them so that we can be aware of what has already been spent, what needs to be spent. Do we need to reallocate some things? For example, we had the money that was set aside for minority businesses. We just got an email back saying, essentially that's useless because we need $500,000 for the actual study. And so I'd like to repurpose that money to help businesses and stuff, but I don't even know where it is. I don't know how much is left, if they spend any in procurement, in the procurement process when they put it out for bid, all of that stuff. I'd like, just simple answers on the amendments. That's all. Thank you.
Is that most appropriately directed to our finance director or to our budget manager?
Jody Dickinson, Finance Director. So getting an update of all amendments, we've done some of that here with when we're talking about the positions that were added. There were other programs that were funded in amendments, and we can do that, but it's not simple. It's we have to check with different departments since the monies are spread across several departments, who's running the programs, what they're doing, and what the status is. That takes some time for coordination, which we can do, but yeah, the budget team is busy, but we can pull that together. I mean, we're halfway there with this position listing that we have, so we've done a lot of the legwork. Anyway, Jake.
Yep. I'll just add, this is something that was brought up, I think, a couple of finance committee meetings ago, or council meeting, work session, and it's something that I am working on. I just need to get, buy-in from directors, because it's not just me that's involved, right? They're the folks that are actually going to implement these programs. So I need to make sure that what I present to you is something that's going to be useful. So it is in process. I definitely heard your guys' concern, and I'm working on it. I am delayed a little bit just because of, we're in budget season.
If we don't spend it, it goes back to the general fund. We lose out on the opportunity for any of those programs. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yes, that's correct. And sometimes the council has come back in the next budget session and said, okay, we didn't have an opportunity to spend it, so can we reappropriate that? If it's one-time funds or whatever, can we reappropriate that in this next budget and have another opportunity to spend it? We've done that a few times.
All right, I will I'll wait. Obviously, I know I just am really, really worried, because I know once we get in this budget, and if I come to you and then try to say like, oh, hey, I need help creating this program, it's going to be impossible to do while we're in the budget. And so I'm really worried about that, and particularly the minority business money. And so thank you very much.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
I just wanted to give a clarification prior to your arriving this morning, Alderman Gay, that we did have a discussion when we were talking about the communication from admin and the council about various things. And we did formally request that there's a process that's put in place so that when we are passing things sooner than when we go back to it and ask what's going on with it, that there's a process in place where there's tracking, timeline tracking. Buckland had agreed that, yes, in fact, that was something that we should be working towards. So there was a discussion prior to your just about that process. So hopefully, as we move forward and we work together, both from the council side and the admin side, to create something that's, possibly a live document, so that we can have access to see where the CIP projects are in production and completion, as well as other amendment projects that are in place, so that we don't have a case where it was in October, then I asked about where the short-term rental manager was, and here we are, February 26th, and we still don't have it. Hopefully, the process in place have those things being more taken care of more in real time than in us remembering, oh my God, I haven't seen it.
One question, I'm sorry. When do we
Back to
get
Alderman Gay.
the Google Doc to have all of this stuff in? Is that, well, obviously you just passed the schedule, and so I'm assuming soon.
Yes. So you'll get, what is the second meeting or the second Monday in April, we'll present the mayor's proposed budget to you. And then, of course, first meeting in, thank you, April, which is the second Monday. But just to I reached out to some folks on feedback on what this Google, my vision was a Google Drive, have a form on there that we can all have access to, and then I asked for some feedback on what it should look like, and I just need to do that and then make sure directors are bought in on it as well.
Alderman Gay.
Is this consistent with the study that HR has done? This updated as of 2/27?
The classification and compensation study?
Because I thought in the classification study, the African American liaison being moved to like N something, but here it says A10 to A12.
I'll turn it to our assistant city manager.
That language was from the original amendment. The actual class and comp study, you are correct, has something that's slightly different. What's recorded there, we had started with what was the original amendment list, which is what that was, but that's not where that position is actually going to end up.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain at this time a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
I think this is
We do.
meet.
oh, okay, all right. Yeah.